A little bit about our speaker today. Glen Kiely is a catering chef at Texas A&M University, Corpus Christi, and has been cooking professionally for 22 years, having held some rather prestigious positions and having worked on many interesting gigs, including cooking for celebrities. He is a lifelong UU and grew up with this very congregation, originally attending with his mother beginning in 1988. For 10 years, he was an advisor for the youth group and taught RE, having attended both himself as a youth and having served on the board and the ministerial search committee. Among several hobbies, he is particularly fond of historical reenactments and, yes, historical cooking. I would like to present Glen Kiely.
Good morning.
Good morning.
So I'm going to start us off today with an ad from the First UU Church of Columbus, Ohio. This is what some other Unitarians were doing in observance of Labor Day. 2024 Labor Day weekend retreat, calling all First UU folks of all ages. This multi-generational gathering is a great way to catch up and a better way to get more deeply engaged in our church community. Swimming, hiking, group activities, stargazing, napping, all with other folks doing the cooking and cleanup. There's a sign-up sheet with it, $140 per adult and $100 per kid. Just put that on a shelf for a minute, I'm coming back to it. As you all know, I'm a chef. A few quick facts about the food industry. According to statistics, the food service industry leads the entire world in cases of depression, suicide, drug and alcohol abuse, and incarceration. I have lost many coworkers, really good ones, over the years to all of the above. We work holidays. Peak business time is when everybody else is off, so we work holidays. In 22 years, I've never been off for Labor Day. In fact, this past Monday, I was at work at 6 a.m. sharp. They don't get paid much. Chefs tend to have side gigs apart from their day jobs because the food industry just, it is what it is. Unionizing is not non-existent, but rare in this industry, and they don't help us much. How many of y'all know I also used to be a bureaucrat? My mid-20s were the era of my most epic hustle of my career. I moved to Seguin when I was 24, and I took a job as a private chef on a horse ranch. This might actually have counted as 2 jobs if you count the fact that my responsibilities there were divided between culinary and agricultural. My kitchen duties were easy. On any given day, I cooked breakfast, lunch, and dinner for anywhere from 2 to 20 people, with larger parties of 200 to 300 being a rare special occasion. Because the kitchen work was comparatively light, I filled the rest of my time there helping with the horses. It was cool. Turns out I like horses. That was fun. I got to ride. I got to joust. It was great. In spite of having a good full workload, it still didn't pay very much. So I took a side job as a mobile notary. I worked almost exclusively for banks and almost exclusively on real estate contracts. There was the occasional factory or commercial building for sale, but most of the time it was for someone buying a house. The documents could often be up to 300 pages long. When someone bought a house, the banks would send me in without any bank representatives or legal representation for either party, and I would have to rapidly explain every page that they had to sign. Basically, it was my job to fast talk people into signing without reading. If there's a hell, I'll be there for the contracts I've stamped. It was easy money. And at the time, I thought it paid well enough. I mean, it was a part-time job that paid about as much as my full-time job. And although I had these two jobs, after my bills were paid, groceries purchased, and car filled with gas, I still didn't have that much walking around money. I was a typical broke young adult. While I lived there, I attended the Unitarian church in New Braunfels, since there wasn't one in Seguin, but it wasn't a long drive. I quite enjoyed the drive. I was introduced to the place because of one of our clients on the ranch. They were a member of the church. So now it's time for some character introduction, because this flashback is the point. I also want to say it was not easy to fit everything into a 20-minute topic. There was me and my 3 droogs. Whoops, wrong story. There was Taylor, a student at the local university and a broke young adult just like myself, renting an apartment in town. There was Alex, whose mother kept her horses on the ranch and also a student at the local university. Also a broke young adult, not living at home, of course, but staying in a house owned by his family. And Alex's boyfriend, Stefano, also a student at the local university, not having a very impressive budget either, electing to move in with Alex. Stefano, oops, I lost my spot. Where'd you go? Stefano was a devout Jew and had normally attended temple with the rest of his family until he met Alex, who was trying to sell him on Unitarian Universalism. Yes, of course, this story would have to have an antagonist. I'm not going to name him. There's a slight chance somebody might know him. A local businessman in real estate who made his living as the owner of several office buildings around New Braunfels. Let's just call him Mr. Skyscraper Man. Now, some details about this little church. It was much smaller than this one, if you can believe that's possible. It was, my God, small. The congregation was comprised entirely of white people, most of them already comfortably retired. Sunday services were usually pretty charming, if not a little campy. They tried so hard to connect with all the causes, but they couldn't escape this sheltered naivete that would show itself time and again. But they tried. I got to give them credit. They were nice. This was a church where, during Black History Month, I found myself sitting in a circle of elderly white folks chanting Harambee, thinking to myself, I see what you're trying to do. This is just kind of embarrassing. After church, there was always a lunch group that would go out, usually to some pretty nice places. Mr. Skyscraper Man was the guy that liked to make the announcements of where we were going, and he was fond of inviting newer members, especially young new members, to lunch. Us young adults would usually turn him down. We would almost never go, with the same old excuse that all young adults use, because it's true. Not today. I'm broke. Often he would insist on our presence and offer to pick up the tab. We still usually turned him down. Every once in a while, somebody would accept his offer. Even I did one day, which I would come to regret. His generosity didn't seem so nice to me anymore when I realized he was keeping tabs on all of us. Now, the Sunday before Labor Day 2009, they did a service all about the labor movement, which read a great deal like a history report. This was the first time I heard the song Babies in the Mill, which instantly became one of my favorite songs. In fact, all the music that day was fantastic. The service was very enthusiastic and full of zeal, but the delivery of the message, however, seemed a bit out of touch with modern labor and economic issues. The vibe I got from this service was, hey, y'all voted Democrat in '08, right? Let's pat ourselves on the back for the accomplishments of 100 years ago. After church, the group went out to lunch as usual, and it just so happened all of the young adults weren't broke that day. We had some spending money and lunch sounded nice, so we all went on our own dime. We got to this place, sat down, and Mr. Skyscraper couldn't help but notice that my friend Taylor was sporting a new piercing that he didn't have the week before. He grumbled about it for a minute and complained about kids these days and their crazy trends. Then it came time to order food. Everyone else at the table was drinking wine with their meals. It set the tone, so I ordered a beer. Mr. Skyscraper's wife commented, "A beer, Glen? I thought you were broke." The young adults just looked at each other with jaws dropped, like, is she for real right now? I replied, yeah, that was last week. I've made a paycheck since then. That was it. Mr. Skyscraper went off, grabbed his soapbox, and proceeded to go around the table one by one and let each of us young bucks know what horrible economic decisions we were making and how we brought every hardship upon ourselves. Taylor for the lip ring, me for drinking a beer, Alex and Stefano for living in Alex's mom's house, and how we have only ourselves to blame for our hardships. I just said that. Whoops, I should have typed better. Okay, like, seriously? If I didn't drive to church in a new Mercedes-Benz, then a beer with my lunch is too irresponsibly decadent for someone like me? Geez, wait till these folks find out I'm into caviar. We sat in silence, exchanging glances with one another as he dished out unsolicited, obsolete advice, until he busted out the old hard work and self-application routine. The eye rolls were painful. I could stand no more, so I interrupted. And boy, did I. Wag of the finger. I said, listen, dude, if you haven't shoveled shit, baled hay, or driven T-posts in the summer sun, acre after acre, you don't get to talk to me about hard work. By the way, didn't we just talk about hardworking people at the church service less than an hour ago? Specifically, the plight and the efforts made by those hardworking people? The four of us mostly couldn't believe that nobody else at the table was intervening. The discussion at that point would become increasingly tense, until someone else at the table finally insisted that we change the subject only after I called Mr. Skyscraper pompous and declared my hypothesis that I could best him at fisticuffs. Someone else at the table eager for a new conversation, asked me what I was doing for Labor Day. I replied, labor. I'm afraid after that, Taylor found a new spiritual home at the UU Church in San Marcos. Alex began going to temple with Stefano and has since fully converted. I was the only one that stuck around. I think situations like that one may be more common than we think. A religion, first of all, that encourages intellectual expansion can only inspire one to seek higher education. You pair that with the fact that this religion is so deeply rooted in early American aristocracy with a great deal of old money in the East Coast particularly, it may be difficult not to develop a somewhat elitist perspective, even if accidentally. So even if only accidentally, we may lose touch with some of the things we think we care about. But UU values can't do much for the world. They're not going to do any good for the world if we simply look down our noses at them. To speak of the labor movement like David Attenborough talking about birds simply won't do anything at all. You can vote pro-union politicians, sure, it's a start, but there's even more. There's a part that it's our daily behavior that should be recognized. Are you still feeding the beast anyway? Now, pertaining to Labor Day in particular, the fact is, nowadays, Labor Day no longer serves its intended purpose. The bankers get the day off, while the people who needed it the most are still at work. People even working at that campground in Ohio. So here's my call to action. And this one's easy. It's actually a call to inaction. Help us lighten the load a little bit. You probably will not be able to convince everyone in the country to shut down their businesses for the day completely. You can't guarantee anyone else will have the day off. But you can at least refrain from adding to the workload. I ask of you next year for Labor Day, don't go out. Don't go to restaurants. Don't go shopping. Don't go camping unless you're going to cook for yourself and clean up after yourself. If you really care about the plight of workers, don't employ the labor of other people while you celebrate their much-deserved day off. Some people will never enjoy a Labor Day weekend. I won't. But if you're so fortunate, please enjoy it from home.